On behalf of my father and my family, I want to thank you for this dedication. This dedication would have meant a lot to my father. My father only had fond memories of his time here in South Korea, training soldiers. See, my father had written to me once in a letter saying that he felt it was his destiny to serve in Special Forces. He knew what it took to become a soldier. Growing up, he had a lot of rough times, and then he saw a lot, but during his 5 tours of duty, he saw a lot more. He saw what combat can do to a soldier. He knew that even the best of men could become broken. During the action where he actually was awarded the Medal of Honor, for he saw firsthand soldiers freezing up. During this action, see, he had been placed near he was bringing up the rear of his men, and the lieutenant was up front. And my father he had this gut feeling that they were fixing to get ambushed. And so he starts making his way up there, and as he's making his way up there, sure enough, they were ambushed. My father told of how he woke up after being blown up, and that the pain was incredible, and his hands, his legs were burned and broken. First, he thought he was blind. His vision was so blurry, but it was from the blood that had been dripping down his face. And when his vision cleared up, he spotted his lieutenant a little bit further down. And see, my father's granny had taught him to have a deep faith in the Bible. So my father at that time prayed to God. And you see, my father used to say he ran with the devil, but God had his back. And my father, he just knew he had to keep moving. He had to get to that lieutenant. So he managed to basically, crawl and drag, mind you, his legs, hands, as I said, burned and broken themselves. And he got to the lieutenant, and the lieutenant, as my father described, was a pretty big man, weighed over about 200 pounds and more than 6 feet tall. My father just, grabbed him. He starts dragging him, trying to get him to safety. And as he's dragging him, he spots one of their men, a sergeant, behind a log, laying there, unhurt and crying, and his weapon just set to his side, untouched. Well, my father yelled at him, please come help me. Help me drag the lieutenant to safety. And the sergeant didn't budge, and he just shook his head no. And that's when the devil, my father let the devil use him at that time. And my father said some words as he was, yelling back at the sergeant to at least give him his weapon. See, my father's own weapon had been blown up and blown out of his hand, so he was weaponless. And sergeant still wouldn't do it. My father spotted the personal .45 that the sergeant had, and he convinced him, in not so nice words, to give him at least the .45. And just as the sergeant tossed it to him, my father could feel, Viet Cong approaching behind him. Got the .45, and he turned just in time. As he looked back over his shoulder, there were 3 Viet Cong, and they were fixing to bayonet them. And my father at that time, he was able to kill 2, and that's when the sergeant, he unfroze, and he killed the 3rd one. And my father, through pure grit and determination, started dragging the lieutenant even more. And even as he went further along, grenades came again, and bullets were whizzing everywhere. And another grenade. My father covered his body over the lieutenant as then my father was again blown up. But you see, my father persevered through grit and determination. He managed to get that lieutenant to safety. And see, my father, he knew what it took, and he dedicated his life to training soldiers to be able to mentally be tough enough to push their bodies harder than they ever could imagine. And I witnessed this firsthand when I was about 8 or 9, and my father was stationed in Fort Benning, and my father and I one of the things that we did together was go on long runs, and he had asked me if I would like to the following morning go on an 8-mile rucksack run with him and his men. And of course, you know, I was eager to spend time with my father, and I said, yes, ready, I'm going. So the next morning we get there, and we get in line, and my father takes me up to one of the young soldiers, and he assigns this young soldier to stay with me and, you know, keep up with me. I actually remember my father joking with him, you know, saying, if you can keep up with her. So then my father, he goes up to the front, and the young soldier, he said, let's come back here, and he brought me to the back of the line. And I looked at him, I said, no, I said, I think we need to be up further. I don't need to be at the back. And the young soldier said, no, I'm in charge of you. I'm to look out for you. You're too little. We're back here. Well, at that time, in the back of my head, I thought, my dad is not going to be happy about this. And you see, as we started out running, my father, he basically would always run 2 times more than any of the men, because he would go from the front to the back and back up, vice versa, you know, to yell encouragement to the men. And I remember seeing as my father was running back, and I saw his eyes spot us, and immediately they went cold, and you did not want to make my father angry. So when he got to us, you know, he said, soldier, he said, is there a reason y'all are back here? And the soldier, you know, he's sort of mumbling, and then he sort of looks up and he said, well, I thought you gave her to me, and it's my responsibility, so I felt that she was too young and too little to be further up than back here. And my father looked at me and he said, Melissa, said, did you ask to be back here? And I didn't want to get the soldier in trouble, but I also knew that my father would not want me to lie, and my father knew that I could do this run. So I looked at him and I said, no, sir, I didn't. So then my father looked back at this soldier, and he said, soldier, he said, is it her you were looking back out for? Said, or were you too worried yourself that you couldn't do this run? The soldier just looked down, he just said, and my father said, you're coming with me. Then my father came back to me, and he put me about midways with another soldier, and we continued to do the run. And this is the part I remember most distinctly. When we got back, my father came to me, he said, Melissa, he said, I'm taking this soldier out again. He said, you go to my office, you wait there till I get back. Now, in my father's office, there was a huge window, and it was cracked open about this much, and I could look out and see into the courtyard area. And I saw them set off, and quite a while later, back they came. And I was watching, you know, my eyes pretty big, because I'm just wondering what, you know, they had actually gone 16 miles. And when you added it up all together, and the soldier, he leaned over, and he was getting sick, and my father patted him and, you know, sort of lifted his head up. And then on top of all that running, my father then has him and the soldier doing jumping jacks and push-ups. And I proceeded to watch when they were done. My father, he put his hand on the soldier's back and he patted his back, and I could see my father's lips and I could hear him. He said the words, "See, I told you you could do it." Then he shook the young soldier's hand. I looked over and I could see in the soldier's face that, you know, he had this sense of confidence, this sense of pride. And you see, that's what my father wanted to instill in his soldiers. He wanted them to understand that they could persevere, they could do it. And you see, my father, he never asked anyone to do anything that he wouldn't or couldn't do himself. He knew that real strength came from within. So, when you step foot onto these grounds, I ask that you not think of my father, but what my father stood for. Being humble, being strong enough to put others before yourself. To always show honor and respect to your fellow man. Most importantly, to persevere and to never, ever give up. Thank you.